Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Chodak, and I am the host of Transformation TV today. And it's a beautiful day here in the Midwest. And I have Dr. Alan Jones with us today. And I want to tell you a little bit about him before I bring him on. Has a PhD in psychology. He's trained in hypnotherapy. He's a master NLP trainer. He's a writer. He's a teacher. He's a speaker. And Alan and I have one thing in common. Well, I believe we have many things in common, Alan. But what we do have in common is we are both transformation teachers on Transformation TV. And Alan has wrote the book, The Secret of Your Future History. And I am going to bring Alan on right now, and we'll welcome you, Alan. There you go. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Robin. Nice to be talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. And you're in London, in the country somewhere. Is that correct?
Well, we are. We're in North Wales, which is sort of middle of England and up and to the left, if you look at the map of England. And we're right in the mountains in an area called Snowdonia. So it's interesting we've got internet connection because we wouldn't normally get that up this part of the world.
Oh, okay. Well, your title, it's very interesting, Alan, because your title is The Secret of Your Future History. Now, that sounds like an oxymoron to me.
Deliberately so, I think. I like the idea of people creating empowering self goals and visions of their own futures. And I think the problem we've found with some visualization techniques, for example, is that they don't work for everybody. And I've studied some people that are very successful, in particular a gentleman called Muhammad Ali, the boxer. And one of the things that we know about him was that he was able to predict his fights, his boxing matches, almost to the round. And when he was asked how he could do that, he replied to the reporter that it was because he had a future history. And I just loved that phrase. And so what if we could engage in our futures in the same way that we engage with our pasts, in similar way to create a memory of a future that becomes more empowering because it's a complete visualization. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you describe it in that way, in a sense, you are actually able to create things or allow things to happen in your future, right?
Definitely.
So, that gives a lot of people encouragement and hope.
Definitely.
They could be looking at their future in a very glim, depressed way, right?
Yeah.
But this gives them hope.
Definitely. I think one of the things that we need to focus on is that even our current reality is all about perception and mindset. So if we free people up to have different perceptions of their current realities, then certainly we can make brighter, empowering visions of a future and create future histories. So as you will have seen in the book, there are 7 sections to the book, which I sort of called the dream realization technique. And they're based on sound psychological research and principles about how to consider things like happiness, how to set ourselves empowering goals and visualizations that are, shall we say, total sensory. They involve every aspect of your sensory experience in the same way that living in today is every aspect of our sensory experience. So we're living our now, but we can be visualizing a future in the same way that we see our now.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I watched your free teaching segment, and I want to tell the audience, if they haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It's great. And I really love the footage that you put in there with Muhammad Ali.
Right.
What a great person to aspire to, right?
Definitely. I think there are aspects of his approach and his own inner psychology that were really worth looking at and seeing what we could take out and model. It's the NLP technique of modeling something that's successful. Now, he had a particular mindset of saying he was the greatest, an affirmation that he aspired to, a mission statement he aspired to. He had a technique for visualizing success Okay, he had also sportsmanlike techniques of putting the opponent down, but we don't focus on that. We focus on what he did for himself to empower himself to achieve the things that he achieved. And of course, he also had a bigger vision other than just boxing. It was about human rights. That was part of what he was talking about at the time. So, yeah, Muhammad Ali is a great role model. And other people that we can see that have used these techniques for personal change, I just tried to put them down into a way that we could teach people step by step how to manifest change with, shall we say, less of the reliance on the mystical, although I think the spiritual path is important, more reliance on what you can practically do. And that's what the focus of the book is about.
Right. Yes, I think that people do like to have steps. We like things. Our brains sometimes like order, right? And logic, and some of our brains are wired that way, and we like to put into place specific steps.
That's right.
Great that you have created this. You call it the dream realization technique?
Exactly, yes. And it's based soundly on psychological principles. One of the things I wanted to do when I wrote the book was to make sure that I could back up all the things that I suggested on the basis of psychological research, as opposed to something that was just purely, shall we say, wish fulfillment. So each of the techniques, each of the chapters in the book talks about the psychological research that's gone to make those steps work. And I've put the references in the book for people to follow up for themselves.
Right. And that's key. That's important. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think it's about creating frameworks for success and frameworks for doing things. And once we have a framework, we can actually learn from the framework and then dismiss the framework and take what's good, what a good practical approach is for ourselves, and learn and grow and develop our own empowering techniques.
Okay. So if the person went online to Transformation TV, they would get a good idea what the book is about. And then if they're interested, they could obviously order your series of teachings, and then your series will take them through all of those steps.
Most definitely. And I think the reason that we've had the 7 steps is we start off with the first step of what is happiness. Because if you speak to most people about what they want out of life, somewhere in the top 10 of their answers will be, I want to be happy. But just what is it that makes you happy? So the first part of the book explores a consideration of what we know can make a person happy, what we know happiness can be, both spiritual and practically. And then we break that down into what is your future dream, how do you achieve the dream, how do you create an empowering visualization, what motivates you. And one of the key parts of the book is actually a lot of self-development work about the stories we tell ourselves. One of the chapters in the book and the approach is, looking at what self-limiting beliefs have been created in your own life that you've actually accepted without any question. I think it's Miguel Ruiz who wrote the 4 Agreements. It says that we have agreed to so many things unconsciously that have actually conditioned the way that we respond to the world. And we need to look at those things. And we can either go through lots of therapy to do so, or make ourselves new agreements, which becomes our way of life today. And I think that's what it's about. So the video segment, the teaching segment, goes through the book chapter by chapter and gives you a hint and a flavor of the contents of the full program.
Okay, that's great for the audience to understand and to know what you're going to get from Dr. Allen's approach. And, you just said something, Alan, that was really interesting. I loved it because I loved that book, The 4 Agreements.
Right.
That's just a great book, a great tool. But I like what you said. You said you could create new agreements.
Exactly.
Talk about that a little bit, would you? I love that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you read the 4 Agreements and similar works, by the way, Ruiz wasn't the first person to talk about this kind of stuff. But when we brought up.
Oh, I just lost you. Oh, boy.
We are surrounded by other people's judgments of us and expectations of our behavior. And the thing that's really interesting there is let's start by making some new ones for ourselves today that we live by. Now, we're 4 agreements about speaking and assumptions, but we can make any agreements we want to. If you look at the world of Reiki, There are the 7 steps in Reiki, which are about the 7 truths that you accept. They're ways of being. So why not create your own personal code that says these are the agreements of how I want to be right now? We all have a mistake when we think that the past defines us. Our past doesn't define us. Our past has shaped us and brought us to this point. It's our future that defines us. So why not be active in your own future? And that's the theme of the book. That's the theme of most of my teachings. Take an active role in defining your future and don't become a passenger. Become the director of your life.
Yes, no, absolutely. And oh no, I love Reiki. I do Reiki as well. I think that's a wonderful, it's another technique or tool that we can utilize. There's a lot of them out there, and I believe that we have to resonate with one
Definitely.
that works best for all of us. And that's why I love Transformation TV, because there's something for everyone here, right? Absolutely.
Definitely. And when you look at the range of teachers that are on the platform, they're coming from different sort of frameworks and focus points, which is great. So it's a really rich, vibrant source of incredible people doing incredible things. And I'm happy to be part of that team.
Yeah, well, we want to learn more. We want to learn more about you, Alan. And I do want to, so I know you can't get, we're not going to talk about all the steps, but, I mean, you can just choose one, but even the first step is happiness, right?
Yeah.
And, I just, sometimes people don't even understand what it feels like to be happy. So Can you talk about happiness a little bit for us?
Let's talk about happiness. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting is a lot of people see happiness as something to aspire to obtain. And it's the Dalai Lama who actually turned around and said, happiness is not what you want, it's what you do. So you achieve happiness by doing. So you do happiness, not be happy. That sounds really complicated. It's very simple. We do things that are in line with our own purpose and our own sense that produce a sense of well-being. We've all heard of the idea of random acts of kindness, for example. Well, that's a step towards happiness. There's been lots of research, and I go into the book in a great detail about what makes people happy, this subjective experience of happiness. And people are asked to rate their level of happiness, which is a personal score, over several months, at the same time being asked to do particular things. Random acts of kindness is one of the things. Keeping a gratitude journal is another thing. Having a personal set of ethics and values they live to, like a code of chivalry or whatever. And these things are about doing happiness, not being happy. If we make happiness the goal, we miss the point. In the same way, I think, like we make money a goal. Actually, most of the wealthy people in the world will tell you money wasn't the goal. It was doing what they loved that was the goal that brought about the success that they felt. So in terms of happiness, we be happy, we do happy, rather than aspire to become happy.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And, I wrote a book as well, and I have 10 steps, and we have a lot of the same steps. And one of them is the act of kindness.
Yes.
But I like what you said about, you be, you do, you be, you do. I mean, you do.
That's right.
And that's why you do random acts of kindness. What you're doing is you're partaking. You're like part of it. You're not just an observer saying, oh, I want this to happen. I want to be happy. You actually have to do the happy, right?
You have to do it. And you have to do it as part of your, we talk about mindfulness quite a lot, but you do this with a presence of you, not as you say, just you're doing it automatic as you feel you've got to. You do it because it's coming out of you. One of my clients last week, who I'd asked to take on the 7 steps as part of her coaching process, she came up to me and said that she's been doing the random acts of kindness for the last few weeks. And sometimes just smiling at somebody. Sometimes it's just giving a nice gesture. One of the things that they told me they did was they went into a shop and somebody had a large note to change for a small amount of shopping that was a few pounds. And so they paid for the shopping. It came from this sort of central place of, I just want to do this now. Now, think of the ripples of goodwill that come from that. The one who's had the shopping paid for found a stranger that had been aware of the situation that she was in. She went back and told her people, you never believe what happened. This person just gave me £2 for my shopping. And we start to spread that around. So we see the change in the world that we want to be. And so it's about doing, not becoming. Becoming means that we're not happy necessarily with ourselves. We be it and we do it, and then we eventually become it.
That's great, Alan. And when you were talking about the woman in the store buying for the person in line, in the U.S., we had something that was started, I don't remember when, but it was like pay it forward kind of thing. And everybody, I'm drawing a blank on where it started. Maybe some of the viewers remember. I don't know if it was the McDonald's or in the drive-through line.
Right.
A fast food restaurant or something. It was McDonald's or Taco Bell or Dunkin' Donuts, whatever it was. And so on this particular day, they designated a day for this. And so you would be in your car, you would order at the window, and then you would buy it for the person behind you.
Love it.
It's brilliant.
And that little simple act, it isn't just about, it's not a financial thing. It's about you have given something, you have gifted something, and that has a resonance all of its own. One of the things I noticed when I was writing the book, that my first 6 steps seem to be very practical and not very spiritual. So the 7th step is about relating it to your own spiritual perspective. Because then we can't not ignore that we are spiritually aware people as well. Whatever you define that, and I don't mean about religious dogma, I mean about a sense of awe and wonder with the nature of ourselves and connection to the universe. So by the pay it forward thing, you're acknowledging there's a connection between you and the person in line and the person behind that, that's quite wonderful, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, Gina Donaldson said she thinks it was Oprah who started it.
She started a lot, that lady.
Well, you know what? Oprah gets around. Hey, she made it to the wedding, right?
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
To the wedding over there.
Yeah.
Prince's wedding. So, Oprah gets around. That's kind of funny. They started it. But yes, that's great. I mean, so if we can just continue on this path, right? That's what we need to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like that you bring in the spiritual side, because I agree with that. We are spiritual. That's what I believe. We are spiritual beings, and it's important to address that component as well.
I certainly think so.
You do that in your last step. You do that.
I do. I talk about. If I step back a little bit, I call myself a rational mystic, which that is also an oxymoron. I have a background in science and psychology, so I can ask the sort of empirical questions and look at data. But personal subjective experience is a spiritual experience. I mean, I'm in North Wales at the moment, and the reason I'm in North Wales is to connect to some of the spiritual mythical stories of our culture, or in terms of the sort of the British culture. And that's a spiritual thing. It's not about religion. It's not about having a strong belief. It's about being connected to the cosmos, the universe, to my past, to my ancestors, and to the people that are yet to come. Yeah. And that's, for me, what spirituality is about. I think the psychologist in me is aware that we can abdicate too much personal responsibility to a spiritual realm, and we take no responsibility for our own development. And I argue this strongly in the book about you have to be active as well as grateful in your own development towards a spiritual future as well as a material future. And it's about that balance. There's a wonderful story that I was told about a Catholic priest told me this story, and it's about a gentleman who is praying to God to be saved because the flood waters are rising, and as the waters rise in his house, he climbs to the top floor, and he's still praying, and God doesn't show up. He gets onto the roof, and there's floods and floods of water passing his house, and he's clinging to the chimney on top of his roof, and a boat comes past and says, "I'll save you," and the man says, "No, no, no, I prayed to God, he'll save me." And then a helicopter flies by and says, "I'll rescue you," and the guy says, "No, no, 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 God is saving me." And of course, he eventually drowns, and when he's in heaven, he says to God, "Why didn't you save me?" And God says, "Well, I sent a boat and a helicopter. What more do you want?" It's about ownership of that growth rather than abdication of the responsibility to something outside of ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good, Alan, you had me chuckling because I've heard that story many times in the Christian church.
Yes, that's right.
And I used to call myself a Christian mystic, and you use the word mystic as well. So I would say Christian mystic because I'm not Jewish.
No.
Or I'm Christian. I'm not Catholic, and I'm not an atheist. Maybe at one time agnostic. I mean, so it doesn't matter what I am. It's just I'm searching for that truth and to have that connection to a higher source. And to other souls, a connection with humanity and with the universe.
Definitely.
So that's interesting, how we have to find our way through our spirituality.
Yes, we do. And I think it is the key word you said there, I think, about connecting to the oneness. Whatever that oneness is, however you want to label it or define it. One of my other heroes is a guy called Carl Sagan, who, American sort of astrophysicist, who would have called himself probably a non-theist. He didn't necessarily believe in God, but he was certainly very spiritual. You've only got to read his writings to see that he understood at a very personal, poetic level his interconnectedness with the universe. And that, for me, is a spiritual truth. Yeah. What are the labels we use to put around of that? It depends upon our upbringing, our whatever sort of spiritual books we've read, what teachings we ascribe to. Right. But I think beyond all of that, it's a purity of connection.
Yes. And Alan, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. And this is what I talk about in my teachings as well. It's about your beliefs and what you grew up with. It's we have in our brains so much from the religious teachers, our teachers, things we read, whatever. We get these beliefs and what we operate on those beliefs. But your teachings, my teachings are, okay, if you're not happy, if you're not doing these things, your book or whatever can help you. Yeah. You can change. You can learn to become happy. And right?
You can learn to do happiness.
Yes, exactly. I've worded that wrong because now, exactly. Yes, exactly. And let's maybe talk about another technique.
Yes, I mean, one of the techniques in the book is something I call shifting, and it fundamentally about shifting perception from one thing to another thing, which, perception is all about belief, isn't it? Seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. And the neurologist and the psychologist in me knows that to be a fundamental truth of how the brain works. We are filled with confirmation biases and prejudices. Our perceptual filters are so tied to our language filters and our belief filters. So we believe what we see. What we see is based on what we believe. So shifting is a technique which uses all of the sensory modalities to create empowering visualizations in the way that the brain creates reality. Hence the shifting perspective in terms of shifting sensory perspective and thinking perspective allows you to create these visions, these future histories. So the shifting technique in the book is, I think, the fundamental core of the book, because it's the bit that really echoes the way we perceive reality.
Sure. And, I said, when I spoke earlier, I said, we can learn. I said, we can learn how to become happy, but you corrected me and said, do happiness, which is fine. But the point is that, yes, we can learn.
We can learn.
stop learning. And our brains are wired to learn.
Yeah, and they're also wired to make sense of things. They are pattern matching devices. So if I see a random pattern in the universe or outside or in my own life, I tend to fit it to what my brain has already experienced, unless I'm skilled or have the framework to challenge that pattern match and create a new pattern. And so changes of belief and changes of perception and changes of reality and changes of behaviors are all about changes of the patterns that our brain is willing to look for. And it goes back to, as you said earlier, about the fact that our stories we've told ourselves and we've been told for our upbringing have created expectations and patterns of behavior, of thought, of words, of deed, or whatever. And those patterns are the things that we can need to challenge sometimes, because they can be limiting patterns as well as empowering patterns. I tend to think of a belief as like a tabletop, and the tabletop is the belief, but the four legs that hold the table up is the evidence supporting that belief. And sometimes we invest a lot of energy into maintaining the legs of the table to maintain the belief, which may or may not be powerful for us. May become a platform for reaching to the stars, or may become a shaky surface from which we can't reach any higher.
Right. You know, that was a great metaphor, the table legs.
Yeah.
And because those table legs, oftentimes, they're operating the way they are because of the people around you.
Definitely. I mean, when I teach courses and stuff, one of the things I use is that metaphor and talk specifically about the idea of a belief that many people in the Western world have certainly held, and that is the belief in Father Christmas, okay? And that belief has affected our perceptions and our behaviors, so much so that if you are a believer in Father Christmas when you're a child, all your parents have to say to you is, are you on the naughty list or are you on the nice list? And that affects the way you behave. And so what are the table legs that support the belief in Father Christmas? Well, one, is there a presence on Christmas morning, right? Or whenever you open them. Two, your friends around you are saying, you've got to believe in Santa. Three, your parents are saying, and your teachers are saying, believe in Santa. And the fourth one is the fact that, well, in my household, you left sort of bits of cake and carrot for Santa and the reindeer. And when you woke up in the morning, they were gone. So it must have been Santa, right? And then at some point in our lives, one of those legs gets shaky. Your friend says to you, you know, it's your parents, isn't it? Or your parents give you the catalogue to choose the presents from. And all of a sudden, the belief in Santa can no longer be sustained and it collapses. And what do? We get over that. Most of us get over that. And we learn that we can build other belief systems. However, some of them we don't challenge in the same way we challenge the Father Christmas belief. We accept them as truths and perpetual truths rather than stages of truths as we grow and outgrow one belief. Mm. And a lot of the people I work with therapeutically, they are living beliefs that they could have outgrown, limitations they could have outgrown. And they project a lot of their current reality on a belief that's 30 years old.
Sure. And you know, the other thing, Alan, is what I find from my own personal journey and from working with my clients is that the beliefs begin to get challenged when there's been a life experience that has just, you know, rocked them off their rocker, or a tragedy or some type of trauma in their life. That was my case.
Yeah.
That's what brings you to that place where you're now starting to look at your beliefs and you're challenging them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then the decision is, do you actually cling on to them because at some level they give you some kind of sustenance? Because we like the familiar, right? So we either hold on to the belief in the hope that doing the same thing will create different results, or our world falls apart and we have to build something brand new.
Right. Sounds like insanity, doesn't it?
It is. It's that definition of insanity, isn't it? And I think we need to treat our beliefs very carefully. And certainly, as a teacher, if we're working with people with a belief system, we have to treat what they believe very carefully, because these are the foundations of how they currently behave, or what they currently think and what they currently do. So it's not a question of just pulling the rug away or knocking the table over. It's allowing people to explore what other structures they need. And sometimes I think in the world outside of the people that work, like the people who work on Transformation TV and those kind of teachers who are heartfelt teachers, there are some people in the outside world that actually want to impose their belief on you rather than give you a chance to explore what you can believe. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I was thinking about the analogy you gave about the table with
Right.
4 legs. That makes the way you described it makes complete sense, because think about a table. You can't just take, when you take one leg off, it's wobbly. You take 2 legs off, it can't stand. So
Exactly.
you have to be very gentle. And this is why this is a process. Okay. And you're right. You just don't change one belief overnight.
Yeah.
It's a process. But great news is that you can change and you can recreate new patterns.
Yes.
Those patterns can be changed.
Definitely.
And I love that. And that's what your teaching is about.
As one of the chapters in the book is about change, the concept of change and various ideas to do with change. And I think one of the first things to recognize is that change is possible. And it strikes me as really odd that there's a wonderful saying that change is the only constant in the universe, right? And yet you talk to people who are in jobs, they are fearful of the changes that may come, or people in relationships, they're fearful of the changes. I mean, I've worked a lot with people that are ending relationships or whatever, and they say the relationship fell apart because the person they became involved with isn't the person that they were 20 years ago. Well, of course they're not the same person. We deny change in some aspects of ourselves, and yet we recognize the need for change. And that's all about what we hold on to, what we become attached to. And those things to be challenged or thought about as well in any process of change. I was lucky enough to work with a couple of people that went through serious, shall we say, life-changing situations. They're fairly well known in the UK. But one of the things I noticed is they go through a pattern of realizing that their life must change, then being disempowered or feeling angry about the fact they've got to change, and then going off the rails for a while until they accept that they can take responsibility and choose the steps, create the goal, and bring it back round to a positive experience rather than a regretful experience. Is that making sense?
Absolutely. And that's really what the goal is. It's my teaching as well. And I would say everyone on Transformation TV, it's to turn it in, whatever it is, into something positive and not something where, you're stuck. I talk a lot about people being stuck because of grief. They've had a grief experience and then they can't move forward. And that's what my teachings are about. So, I always say you can turn your tale, your tragedy into a beautiful tale of love, okay, or triumph.
And I think it's deeper than that. It's about, as you find, encouraging the person to look at the pattern of change and where it can lead them now and the things that can become brighter for them. And it's how to manage that process, that it's their own change process. It's not somebody's 6-step grief process that we read about in psychology and coaching. We're always involved in looking at how people are managing their own processes within the frameworks that we understand as therapists, as teachers, as counselors.
Sure. And, the problem, often we get into problems when we want to try to impose like rules on people or like, okay, this is the way it is. This is going to happen to you and you're going to feel like this and you're going to feel like this. And we impose those onto people. And we need to understand that everybody is individual.
Most definitely. And their experiences are unique. So we may have had a similar, loss, grief, whatever. But it's not their experience. I was working with some teenagers quite recently in an anger management issue. And one of the young lads, the teenage lad, said to me, "I've been in anger management before." I said, "What happened?" He said, "I hit the anger management counsellor." And I said, "What do you hit him for?" He said, "Because he kept saying, I know how you feel. I know how you feel. And this lad said, how can anybody know how I really feel? And he's right. You've got to start from the point of view is tell me how you feel. I can try to understand your pain, your truth, your anger, but I have to give you the framework or the tools or the structures to move you from where you are now to where you want to be without necessarily imposing anything of my stuff onto you. All I've got is my tools, my strategies, my techniques, which are hopefully applicable to each individual I meet.
Right, right. And these tools, yes, they can. It's like you said, it's very individual. And the person they can go through your steps with you. Okay, they can watch your videos and they can learn those steps.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they could take that first step about happiness, like how do I do happiness, right? And they can go through those steps with you, and then they can see how they're feeling about them and how they could begin to implement them into their own lives. And then they see the change.
Yeah, yeah.
Start to implement things, you begin to see change. And if you like it, and if it feels good, most likely you're going to continue doing it. You're not going to do something that doesn't feel, well, that's another story. We can talk about self-sabotage. We're not going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about if you want to move in the direction, okay?
Yes.
Right?
And I actually think one of the key things, and I say this to everybody, journaling is so important. Just making a note of how you feel about something several days after applying a tool or technique. Because if you need something to check your progress against, and you need something to see it that you're marking the steps of your progress. So journaling for me is the number one key thing to do on the process of change. And I've had a bit of feedback on the book, which people have kindly sent in via Amazon and stuff. And one of the things they've said is they like the fact that they could almost do a step a week, and the encouragement to journal, they could actually give themselves their own feedback on the process. And once they were given the tools how to measure, shall we say, how to measure happiness or how to measure motivation for themselves, they had something to reflect upon. So they could actually say, yeah, I can prove that I feel happier to myself because I've got this tool or this technique or this idea to think about.
Yeah, that's great. And because people often like measurable tools. So that's why people go to life coaches because they can set goals, they have accountability, they can measure their goals, they can work towards them. Yeah. That's great. So your book allows them to do that in a sense.
Definitely, and the teaching segment does that, and then the in-depth teaching segment, the one that people can subscribe to, that has more tools. There's a motivational questionnaire and survey. There's various, shall we say, metrics or tools that people use to measure their progress.
Okay, and people, in addition to getting your teaching segment, do you work with people one-on-one?
Yeah, I do. In fact, just starting up several programs based upon the dream realization technique, which at the moment I'm going around to various places introducing the technique. And there is a coaching program that can be one-to-one via Skype or one-to-one person if they're in my area. But that also is where I'm working at the moment. Because I think what Transform TV allowed me to do was to, if you like, condense all my thinking from the last 18 years into a structure that I think, yeah, that works for me. That actually is my encapsulation of the bulk of what I'm about. And now I can grow from that and develop from that. And hopefully people who read the book can enjoy it, enjoy the anecdotes and the stories, and actually step for their own transformation. In fact, step into future history,
No, absolutely. And that's what we're hoping for everyone that, is a part of Transformation TV. Yeah. And for each individual teacher, for the work we're doing, I mean, we want people to be transformed. Yeah, and we are offering them techniques on how to do this. And the book is, if they get your book, they get your teachings, then, they are going to be on their way to changing their future history.
Exactly.
And the way you explain it.
Yeah, and also they've got a way through the book of contacting me if they want to get some more ideas or thoughts. I think that there's a wonderful thing with the Muhammad Ali story I started with. He was asked by this reporter how could he predict his fights, because out of 19 professional fights when he first turned professional, he won all of them and managed to predict the rounds in which he would achieve a win, which is quite incredible, really. So a reporter said to him, how do you do it? And he said, well, I've got a future history. And then the reporter, in a rather sort of, shall we say, cynical voice, said, but in your recent years, you haven't won everyone you predicted. And Muhammad Ali apparently said, that's simply because the other guy had a better future history than me. And that's empowering, isn't it? Because actually we can create a future history, we can move towards it. And if we're not quite successful, it doesn't mean we failed. It means we moved towards a goal that we need to sharpen our perspective about.
Wow, that's a great way. That's a great way to put it, Alan. And I would say to everyone listening, I'll ask you the question. Do you want to have a good future history? Hey, I want to have the best.
Yeah. Define it. Define it, become an active participant in it. Don't just sit and wait for it to happen. The number of people I meet that say to me, my life will be better once I've got some money. How are you going to get some money? Well, I'm going to win the lottery. No, that's not necessarily going to happen. Take control, take responsibility, live your own karma, right? And start to create those visions of the future which center around you doing happiness and paying it forward.
Yes. Well, I love it. I'm inspired. I don't know about the people listening, but I am so riled up. This is exciting stuff.
It's exciting, right? Because it's powerful stuff, and it's about people being the best they can be through their own efforts, and that I love it. I love it.
And I don't know if you know this person. There's Jay Fernley. I don't know who that is, but they are absolutely riled up too, and we're
fantastic,
and we're happy. I mean, it makes it. It gives. It's exciting because we have these opportunities.
Yep.
We have these. I like. You can use the word power. There is power in this.
There is power. Yeah.
And the great thing is we can be transformed. We can be transformed. So it is exciting. We don't have to just be here now. We can think about what is to come and create this future history. And
for me, it's real magic. Okay, it's real magic, real alchemy. It is actually personal alchemy. It's transformational work. It's actually touching deep within us, right? And I just see people who take an active role in creating a vision of a future that they can totally buy into. That's exciting. That's exciting.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we gave the listeners plenty to go home and think about and start to do.
Definitely do.
And they can go to Transformation TV and get your free segment, get your videos. And thank you for taking the time, Alan. I know you're on your little vacation, but we appreciate that you have joined us today to share your wisdom and knowledge with us.
It's been my pleasure. So everybody just go create future histories, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, everyone. Don't forget to join us again on Transformation TV in 2 weeks. See you then. Bye for now.
Bye.